I feel like the same with my analyst. She lives like maybe 45 minutes if I walk fast. We started doing, because I see her twice a week, and so to take 2 times out of the week to walk to her house is quite a while, but Zoom is so easy. And then, but she's even started telling me I can bring my dog, so I've got like less and less excuses as to why I don't want to do it, but I'm definitely don't want to go back to doing it in real life.
45 minutes is not an insignificant. Talking each way?
Yeah, but I think it's because I walk my dog at least an hour and a half every day, so it's kind of essentially killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But I also don't want to go and to go and see face to face.
The dog thing is interesting. Is that an emotional support thing, or is that kind of a convenience thing?
It definitely, so like a friend of mine had a dog who only moved over, like he did some studies in France, and so my ex and I had looked after her for maybe 3 years, and I got really used to like because my friend's dog was a border collie as well, which is what I have now, and they need heaps of walking, so I kind of got used to, like, I'm super not, and even though I grew up on a farm, I'm really not motivated to do outdoorsy walking, exercisey stuff. But because of having this demanding dog, I got kind of used to being out and about. And then so when he got back and took his dog back, I was like, I want to get my own one. And so I've had Sylvie, my dog, for 4.5 years now. Like, we got her when she was a puppy. And yeah, she's the best. Like, I feel like it sounds like you're a bit the same. Like, I need, if I was having a shit time and I didn't have to walk her every single day, I would definitely not leave bed-ish. And so it's kind of good to have the extra. But also I get like kind of weird like attachment guilt. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm a terrible dog parent. Like, I project. Like, she's the ultimate projection machine. And actually, like, she's the most spoiled dog in Australia, so.
It's hard though, right? I mean, as a touring musician.
I mean, I don't tour very much. I mean, obviously pretty much since COVID, I haven't toured very much at all, yeah. But I think probably starting again, maybe the beginning of next year. But yeah, I was meant to come to America and Europe in 2020, and obviously that I got like a O visa and all that kind of bullshit, but that didn't happen. But it kind of, I think in retrospect, that like I've done a lot of like recording and kind of like a lot of stuff's happened at that time that I think it's positive that I didn't do it then. Yeah, I don't think it would have been that necessarily the best. And also, like, I've waited so long to do that kind of stuff. If the difference between me, it's not that much of a difference for me to wait like 6 months to a year to do it when, at this point.
Yeah, 6 months to a year and 3.5 years are obviously a pretty different period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did a lot of touring when I was in my 20s, like, and also, so when I was in a band from New Zealand, it was what we basically did in lieu of touring was we just moved to countries. So we moved from New Zealand to Australia, and then from Australia to London, and then one of the people in the band that I played with, who is also an ex of mine, his parents lived in Geneva because his dad worked for the WHO, so we spent a lot of time in Geneva and Europe, and for no money, of course, because we'd just borrow their car and drive around. That's how we could afford. So I think for me, I felt like we did so much when I was younger that I don't have that kind of drive to travel and tour. But I mean, of course I will, and I like it, but it's not something that I kind of necessarily think is the be-all, end-all, if that makes sense. Well, you know how Chekhov doesn't like, whatever Chekhov says about travel, like home's more interesting. Like, I feel like that, like, I don't really have that kind of, like, wanderlust feeling.
I was traveling a lot for work this year. I was on, like, 2 to 4 planes a month, and then the last month and a half, I've been home, and I was really I was looking forward to it because like traveling wears on you after a while, and and I miss being home, and I miss the rabbit, and now I'm antsy after about a month and a half, and I think I think a lot of it's psychological to me because I think that so much of my feeling, all of the bad things that I've experienced in the last 3 years have been in this apartment, this 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, I don't know. I get a little bit of like home phobia, to be honest. I understand that. Like when it feels a bit yucky to come back because of bad stuff, I don't like that feeling.
The move from New Zealand to Australia, I understand obviously a larger country and a larger market, and Australia to UK, that's a pretty big jump. I think so I'm 41, and I think so that would have been when I was I guess 20, so we moved to Australia when I was maybe 21, 22, and yes, I've been here kind of on and off for almost 20 years, but I think that would have been in 2002 or something, but I think that when we were young there was kind of so Australia is very kind of American. I mean, this is also pretty outdated me saying this, but Australia is quite American centric, and back in pre-internet New Zealand was very UK was for white people at least was there's a bit of a motherland vibe to it, and there's kind of it felt like at least that there was a kind of a path that you go to Melbourne and then you go to London and then whatever, but of course the age that we're at, that was very much not the case. But I mean, we had a great time. I hated London so much. I feel just everything about it. But because we were so close to Europe, we kind of used that as we'd get I don't know, £40 flights to Europe, and then just like I said, borrow my ex's parents' car, and then just drive around and borrow gear everywhere, and basically not only spend money on cigarettes because they put you up and feed you and everything, and so it's a good opportunity for that. But looking back, it seems mental because we had no. I think we just maxed out credit cards, and I wonder what young people would do now, because I feel this is such a boring topic, but cost of living, I don't think that you would be really able to do that to the extent that we did these days. We just literally chuck our houses in, quit our jobs, go over, then come back and kind of start again. But yeah, I don't know. Don't know if people, and always working. I worked in hospitality as a chef for years and years, but still nowhere near enough to kind of cover that kind of thing. I feel if you're moving country twice for a band, that's a lot of commitment, and you must have felt that you were on the cusp of something.
I think so. That band was called Batrider, and that was we did a lot of stuff, but I feel we recently actually played a show for a festival in Melbourne that went really well, but it was pretty interesting playing in a band again and navigating what other people want as opposed to just what I want. But I think that, to a certain extent, we were probably a bit delusional in that we thought that, because especially the timing was pretty, we were basically trying to be successful as a touring band when streaming and internet was taking over, and so everything.
The record industry was very much in the throes of collapse at that point.
Yeah, but we were A, we were idiots. B, we were delusional. C, we didn't really even understand anything about that anyway, even if it wasn't collapsing. And I think we just kind of blindly thought that, well, myself, I was, by the end, I was the only kind of existing member, but I think at that time we were just you kind of be good, you work hard, and you commit, and then if you do that, then you will have a sustainable kind of career. But, I mean, to a certain extent, I was kind of right in that, like, 20 years later, like, I just do this, like, do music and art for work now, and it's massively, not a financial windfall, but it's sustainable, like, but it's not in the same way that I think. Like, I think that with the band, it was more like keeping 3 or 4 kind of adults. The same kind of timeline is insane. I don't know. That's difficult to do. I don't know how people do it, really. I suppose people don't. I suppose people just have lineup changes and, or break up.
It sounds like things just kind of petered out eventually with the band.
It was a little bit of a implode, I guess, in that, so one of the people in the band and myself broke up, and then the other person and I were together, and then...
You didn't learn your lesson the first time.
No. What's learning? What's this learning you speak of? But yes, but that was after 10 years, and in retrospect, it was massively time for that to happen. And that's when I started doing my solo stuff in, like, maybe 2011. I think my first record came out in 2012.
I was talking to somebody recently who has been in a band for, 20, probably 30 years at this point, and he recently started playing out acoustically, and he expressed the kind of the terror that comes along with that, at least initially, moving from playing with a bunch of musicians and having, if something goes wrong.
Who is this? Is this someone you heard on the podcast?
Yeah. It's a Southern California punk band called Face to Face.
I listened to that. Yeah. And he's doing painting and stuff.
There's definitely some parallels. But he, he's in this like noisy punk band, and they've been doing it for a really long time, and you get used to it, and then he enters this point in his life where he's going to like stand out in front of people and play an acoustic guitar. It was a terrifying experience. Like it's a very vulnerable experience to do that.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to him talk, because I guess because he spoke about, I guess I could hear, or my takeaway from listening to him was that kind of an adjustment of expectation, but also kind of realizing that he had actually managed to, like, I felt like he was kind of assessing in a positive way the level of success. So I think he used that word that he'd achieved, in that he had been able to spend his life doing music. And I guess, like, I kind of feel the same, but I think my thought was also, like, kind of thinking about that in America as opposed to Australia too. Like, I feel like in America you can probably be at the level that it sounded like he was at, and it probably is a lot more than, because Australia is so much, and New Zealand is so much smaller, do you know what I mean? So it's kind of harder to get that. There's not that, I feel like that middle level of success is a bit less apparent here, because you're either kind of unknown or you're doing you're successful in, in quotations, but then, yeah, I don't know. It was interesting hearing him talk about that, though. Because obviously being from here, I hadn't heard of him, so I was like, I wonder what this man's like. And so I looked him up on Instagram and stuff.
Completely understandably that you sort of went into sort of the financial side of that, and how sustainable that is. Because I was speaking specifically of just being sort of like exposing the side of yourself in front of people, playing for a first time in front of a crowd without the bands that's a difficult transition for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think maybe I didn't pick up on that because I don't really feel like that. I think I've been kind of like playing, like performing since I was literally like 14, 15, and so, and even like I learned piano as a kid, so like, doing like recitals or whatever. I feel like, that's kind of not, that's one of the things that, like, I have many problems, but that's not one of them.
Earlier you did allude to that it wouldn't have been the right time, 2020, to come over here and to play Europe, that you weren't quite ready, and that maybe you've grown, or that things have happened to you in the interim that have made you more ready for that experience. What Where were you at, and why wouldn't that have been the right time?
You're an astute listener. I think I have quite a lot of problems with, I guess primarily with like anxiety and depression, but also I have quite a significant alcohol problem that I manage relatively well these days, but definitely around 2019, coming into 2020, that was like, I definitely would have been able to do it, but I definitely would have drunk my way around America, and I think it wouldn't have been, it would have been fine, but like, I'm kind of quite functioning in that, like, if I need to, I can make stuff work, but I think, it probably wouldn't have been the best for myself. So I think I'm kind of glad that, I've always been like, I mean, even in what I've described to you so far in terms of like moving and moving around and doing what I've done in the last 20 years, like I'm kind of definitely more inclined to kind of park whatever I need to and to kind of push forward. And I think I'm one of those irritating people that, for me, COVID was a bit of an enforced don't do anything, but also I think maybe my age and just doing a bit of, or doing a bit / a lot of work on my own stuff. But yeah, so I think now is probably less likely to end in tears if I tour than would have been in 2020.
Early on in the pandemic, we kind of went in different directions. You know, it was like, I described this experience of hitting a wall and being at the end of my rope. It sounds like it was actually a healthy period for you. Yeah, like
I had a year off. I'm going to therapy when I'm super into psychoanalysis and therapy. But I had a year off for the first year. So for 2020, like mostly because I couldn't afford it, because obviously I wasn't working and it's super expensive. But then when I went back, kind of mostly, not necessarily because I could afford it, mostly because I needed to after a break, my analyst kind of referred to it as she said, it sounds like it was a very salutary time for you. And I think it really was, just because, I've never really been able to have a break from work, or, people have died and I've gone to work the same day, and, you kind of just carry on and on. I think if you're someone like me and, opportunities maybe don't seem as kind of, what's the word that I want? As frequent as perhaps they could be for other people, or perhaps when opportunities do come, you kind of feel like you don't have a lot of agency to, you kind of feel like a bit more of a slave to when things are possible, if that makes sense. Then I tend to kind of, in the past at least, just do things regardless of whether it's good timing for me or whether it's good for me. But I think in saying that, what I just described, I don't think that's reality. I think that I just maybe just treated it like that for whatever reason.
When you say things, you mean personal, professional, both?
Yeah, I guess, if someone's I guess I've always worked forever. I think, I guess just using our current example of the conversation you had with the man that we were talking about, he, there's not really, in Australia and New Zealand, there's not really opportunities to constantly be touring as there is in, Europe and America. So the kind of idea of just being a professional musician, you kind of have to hit some kind of certain something to, or, lots of people that I know kind of segue into either academia or or they do a lot of kind of grants work, that's kind of more project or, more in the arts world. But you kind of really have to do that because you can't, there's only people do a lot of rural stuff, but in terms, there's not really like a touring circuit or in Australia, and so I feel like I'm making it sound depressing, but it's just different. Is what I'm, and like I think if you're in Australia and New Zealand, there's kind of like a sense that I feel like for me, I've always just been quite insular and self-involved, and that's kind of allowed me to keep doing stuff. But I feel like definitely at large, and in kind of a more commercial sense, there's always the vibe that you have to kind of like do well overseas and then you do well here. It's been long and difficult, but also very rewarding, and I feel like I haven't really made any kind of compromises in what I want to do, and that's satisfying, and that's kind of what I anticipated when I was a kid as well. So,
as somebody on the outside, I have a very specific idea, maybe of like where you're at in your career and when things happen, and obviously things happening over here is different than things happening on like literally the other side of the world. But it seems like, to me, from the outside at least, that you hit perhaps a new plateau with the last record.
Oh, definitely. I think, but I mean, yes, definitely. And kind of in keeping with what I'm saying, I think people were like, the being on Cool Rock Stars and stuff, that kind of reflects back here, and do you know what I mean? Like, it kind of does feed into it. But no, definitely, I think that record for me definitely, like I said, it's my 8th studio record, but I think that it was kind of elevated by a bit of stuff. Like, so Tony Espy, who produced it, is a friend who I've met through music. He mixed an earlier record of mine, but then he did all the kind of avalanches and that kind of, like, he has done a few quite notable things in his career, and he's definitely like kind of more of a high-end kind of producer, and my stuff obviously is generally a little bit more sparsely kind of arranged. But yeah, so he worked on this record with me, and I think it came up really well, and yeah, I think it's a little bit, I don't know, I think that's probably an accurate assessment of it. Like, the production is a bit shinier.
Of the new record?
Yeah.
Emotionally, it's also a very different record, and that seems to stem from maybe the place that you were in at the time that you were writing the songs. Yeah,
I think my previous records, the previous 3 especially, were very like, there was a little, like, 2019 was a bit of a peak in terms of the bad times of me, and that's not to say that, like, I'm always reticent to say that things, and then all of a sudden it got better, because obviously not only is that misleading, but it kind of sets me up for well, yeah, and then it's like, it's so much more disillusioning when things go bad again, and you're just like, oh fuck it.
I'm not any big believer in the power of positive thinking by any stretch of the imagination, and a large part of that is because, like, I am a fairly pessimistic person by nature. He is as well, and he said that, like, it kind of, that thing about you, like, putting, I don't know, good vibes into the universe is actually true to a certain extent.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I subscribe to that.
Well, here's what I'll say. I don't, but I also know that I've not necessarily tried that before.
Why don't you
and that I am suffering the consequences of not having at least tried that.
Did your friend watch that? Was that the Yes Man, that Jim Carrey movie? watch that for inspiration.
I don't know. Maybe it was on Netflix or something. Yeah, that would be very funny if he got an inspiration from a
Jim Carrey movie. Yeah, I've watched this incredible film.
An especially good one. Yeah.
I think, like, look, yeah, I mean, I guess there's obviously some truth in it. I feel like my partner, Simon, refers to some people kind of as malcontents. Like, it's always something, I feel like, I think a distinction on purpose, and, like, not necessarily I'm not liking, like, people, but also just basically there's nothing that will ever, I mean, I don't know, it's his thing, but, like, I think there's a certain truth in that, yeah, some people will never be happy with what they have or will always be able to find something, but I think positive thinking, repelling negative experiences, I don't know if I can get behind that too much.
In his estimation, are you a malcontent?
I don't think so. I think I am quite positive. I think I'm just like a real melancholic in the sense that when I am down, I'm just like, there's never been anything good. There will never be anything good. This, like, any time I've thought that I was happy, I was completely lying to myself, and it's ridiculous, and this is the truest thing that's ever happened. And on a day like today when I'm like, I had a good sleep and, it's quite nice to be talking to you, and I'm like, yeah, everything's, I don't know, I don't even remember really what I was complaining about so much when I thought that it was the most dramatic moment ever.
The distinction is that for a malcontent, it's that all the time.
I think I'm using like a Lacanian thing, really, like a...
No, I know. I'm asking very specifically about his and your definition.
I think his is more for people who I think if I were to try and define it, I think his is more for people who there's always an external reason why something's gone wrong for them. So maybe it's more of a lack of like responsibility or self-awareness maybe, or something like that. So it's always like, it's the problem's never lying with what they're doing. The problem is always someone's done this or someone's done that. It's not, but yeah, I think for me, what I'm talking about is I'm very like 100% one way or the other. I don't know which one are you?
I definitely trend more toward the negative, but what's interesting about this is, is talking of depression. For me, it's actually a good sign when there's an identifiable external source of depression for me.
Like something's happened to cause you to feel bad?
Like in the case that I was telling you about at the beginning of the conversation, like those are like clear bad things that happened. And those were things that put me in the place I was mentally. And it's a lot more difficult for me, or would be a lot more difficult for me to grapple with a far more abstract version of depression.
Yeah, I think that's, to be honest, maybe where I'm at like these days, in that when stuff is falling apart, it's definitely, I feel like, look, to be honest, I had almost like it was like a trump card in the back of my back pocket of like, yes, I am not doing very well at all, but I know that if I stopped drinking as much, didn't make such poor choices, maybe like, basically did the things that you on paper should do to be better, then I was like, I know if I did that, I'd be better. And then I did that, and then I wasn't better, and it was like, fuck, this is heaps worse than I thought it was. I think that, like, overwhelmingly, I am a lot better than I used to be, but yeah, it's just kind of, it does hit a bit different when it isn't something that you necessarily can change. It's really dumb. Like, I've kind of ended up back, like, I remember when I was a teenager, like I've seen like a trillion different psychs and stuff since I was like 17. And I remember going to like my first psych and like her talking like mindfulness stuff, like, and doing CBT with her. And then I did that to know success for a long, like till I was like in my maybe 32. And then I did psychoanalysis from then until now. And that was that has been like, I really love that. But then also now I'm kind of coming out the end of it and I'm like, oh, now I'm just doing like having to do mindfulness, which is what I was told to do when I was 17. Like, just if you feel bad, just sit with the bad feelings. I'm like, this is the worst of all, but it's kind of bizarrely come full circle. But I think like mental health in general is becoming like, and I'm going to use the word more holistic in terms of the fact that nothing's very, things don't tend to be so orthodox these days, but yeah, the irony is not lost on me that I definitely scoffed at this, 20 plus years ago.
None of that is strange or surprising to me at all. And to a certain extent, I've had a similar experience. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is just that most 17-year-olds just aren't ready for that. And a big part, a lot of it's hormonal when you're 17, that it's, listen, it took me really until the last year or two, I finally got to a point, and like medication is actually probably a big part of this, but I finally got to a point where I could like actually meditate every day and not just like spiral into this giant pit of anxiety.
Spiraling's the big one. I think I'm not much like of a meditation, but I'm not very good at that kind of stuff. Which is, I get that's totally where, obviously, and at least in part, like where alcohol comes in, because it's just like I can't really turn off, and I don't mean it like 100%. And I've got no like, I have a minor like greater political aversion to medication, but in terms of like whatever works for people, whatever works, and unfortunately for me, no medication ever really does. Like it really does not agree with me, but. Yeah, but I think stopping the spiral is something that has become very important to me. Like I think, and that's, I guess, what analysis is kind of pivotal about, is like just catching it, like just paying attention and catching when it's happening. And if you can catch it in time, and like, it sounds like that's what meditation maybe does, without wanting to put words in your mouth, maybe does for you. Like, yeah, then it stops the getting to a point where it's too late and you've missed the chance to get off the bus and you're sleeping at the depot. It
was interesting to me when you were describing some of the things that you've been through and some of the improvements that you've had during the pandemic, during this time where, you didn't have to worry about other things because obviously the world had slowed down. Because me, and this is my spiraling and this is my anxiety and this is why I couldn't meditate for a really long time, is because like I'm not comfortable in my own head. And if things are quiet and if I'm not distracted by things, like that's when things can get really bad.
Yeah, look, I guess when I talk about the kind of coming out of because Melbourne, this is, again, look, this isn't like a hot take or anything, but yeah, so Melbourne was in lockdown for like almost a couple of years, and that's kind of when it was a bit... yeah, things were difficult, but also it was like no one was doing anything. Like it was like if you're someone that gets stressed out by plans, if you're someone that gets stressed out by, being overloaded, that, and which I kind of am, then that really dialed that down. But then it's kind of been like post that kind of stuff that a lot of my problems have become not resurfaced is too strong. Basically that. It's just been time for me to kind of address them again. And, yeah, I don't know. It's hard and ongoing.
The you on this record and the you on the last record are different people that obviously a lot has happened to you, and the stories that you have on the last record are, a lot of them are dramatically different than... I haven't heard the entire record yet, but what I've heard on this record. And I wonder how much of that healing process or that growing process was a direct result of writing those songs last time.
I think I kind of write pretty compulsively in that, but I think that, and this isn't necessarily something that I think about consciously, but it's definitely, at least in hindsight, also always seems to function as a working stuff out. I never like it when people use the word like cathartic for stuff like that, because, and I feel like even talking to you to this short extent, you would be of the mind that, you know, it's not really like you do a song or you do something and then it's gone and then you're like, oh, those feelings are out. I've succeeded in purging. Like, it's not that at all. But
it can still be a helpful process to write through things. I mean, it is a helpful process to write through things regardless.
Yes, I think so. I think I was I'm recording in a couple of weeks, my new record, and I was kind of talking to the man, Chris Townend, who I'm doing it with, and, you know, we're talking about how he was talking about someone who he's very good friends with who had, like, a really successful, like, pop career, but who, I think they're a bit older than me, they're probably like mid-late 40s, looks back on their career and they're not proud of anything they did because they got too much kind of part of, you know, obviously it's a little bit different generation to now, obviously, as well, but at that stage we're too much part of kind of like, you know, I guess like machine, so to speak, and that lots of people had hands on what they did and etc. And we were kind of talking, and how like that kind of almost paralyzed that person's creative output because their schedule and everything was so demanding that it kind of left no room for reflection and no room for personal growth, and that they were constantly under demands to do more and more and more. So their kind of their work and their work never evolved at all because there was never any pause for thought. Personally, my opinion is I know this person's work, and there's a question mark for me around whether they had that in them at all, and whether
there was somewhere to grow to.
Exactly, and like whether or not they're like, I feel like you make choices, right? So kind of like if you make the choice to do what they did, like whether if you were in a place where you would make that choice, whether you had the motivation to kind of whether reportage and exploration, personal exploration was their motivation, question mark. But I think there's truth to what he said in terms of you need the kind of repose to kind of change. And I kind of said to Chris, I was like, oh, you know, for me it feels like that, you know, you want your work to be realised and you want also to have progress in your work. So I'm really pleased to hear that it does sound like things change, because otherwise it kind of feels like if you have a friend that's kind of constantly having the same conversation with you over and over and over again, and you just want them to move, you know, and like be writing about different things. And so I think kind of just to a certain extent consciously, but to a certain extent consciously, that's what I've done with my work, is that, you know, be driven to kind of push it forward so that I'm not writing about the same problems I had when I was a teen, in my 20s, 30, you know, like I want to be writing about different stuff because I just don't want to be having the same conversation over and over and over again.
Listening to a lot of punk rock music, I definitely would have begrudged people for chasing success in a certain way and trying to hold on to it. But at this point in my life, I don't really begrudge people that anymore. I understand, I understand people want a certain level of popularity, and I think that's okay. And I don't think every song, every piece of music needs to be a masterpiece, and that's totally fine.
Yeah. Look, the older I get, the more I like the idea of just being an entertainer and it being entertainment. Do you know what I mean? Like, I like... And so even like in a... Like for my live shows and stuff, because I do play, even though I don't tour a lot, I do play a lot. And I don't not tour, I don't know why I'm saying that, but like just not like, I guess I'm not doing months and months in a row kind of thing. Yeah, I try and keep it pretty light, try and do some jokes and keep it pretty amusing, but... And obviously this is a bit of a 90s kind of hangover, but I think that I definitely didn't want to be seen, and this is a bit of a New Zealand thing as well. I think you don't want to be seen to be wanting to do it, but you also like want to really do it. So there's kind of like a constant kind of undermining of what you're doing to
do what?
I guess to achieve. It
is a very 90s thing. the slacker thing.
Yeah, and especially like take the 90s thing, like multiply it by New Zealand, where like there's like, then you just have like the conundrum where you're constantly undermining yourself and, cutting your nose off to spite your face and
self-sabotage
and in a very, very, with a lot of utility, I think. So, yeah.
You get good at it after a while.
You do. You really do.
Was that something that you grappled with?
Like, it's difficult to say with me because I think also at that age I probably had a lot of, like, X's against my name anyway, and that, like, a woman, like, it sounds kind of almost a bit trite to say these days, but definitely it was different being, like, kind of in a rock band when I was a teenager as opposed to now. But yeah, being a woman, like, not being heteroflexible, which I never really, like, grappled with myself, but would have definitely come into play, being from New Zealand, not being, like, conventionally really beautiful, all the things that kind of come with. I remember being in a band when I was, like, 20 and, like, the reviews of our shows on, like, message boards the next day will be like, they are ugly. And it's like, do you know what I mean? Like, it was
sorry. Whoa. So you said reviews and then you said message boards and those two things.
Yeah. Oh, but you know what I mean? Like, there was a lot going on.
I was like, those are like nasty newspapers in New Zealand.
It's true.
You're talking about some dude on
no. Yeah, or like, but I mean, there was definitely, like, in New Zealand, there was, like, one that was the one that, like, that in Australia, in Melbourne, there was one that was the one that, that everybody who was involved in music was on. I'm sure there's equivalents everywhere, but yes, I don't know, it's difficult, and then also, like, I have my own personal bullshit from when I was a kid, and, like, and then I have my own, like, kind of stubbornness, and, I'm my own version of stubborn and dogmatic, and so, like, I think there's a lot of stuff going in that has led me to now, which I like now, but, like, there's probably an easier way to have done what I have done.
The thing about self-sabotage generally, and this is a thing that you start to figure out about yourself when you, whether it's therapy or, whatever process you go through, is that a lot of it's only identifiable much later. You don't realize that you're doing it to yourself in the moment.
Yeah, or you don't care. I guess. I think, for me, I think what's that Freud paper? There's the Freud paper, people who are sabotaged by their own, people who are ruined by their own success, I can't remember the name of it, but, like, that comes to mind. But also, like, I think that I'm just quite an angry person, and I always have been, but I think I'm very uncomfortable with that, so I kind of turn that inwards, and that comes, like, I take that out on myself, if that makes sense, like, because there, for someone like me, there is a lot of things historically to be angry about, and I think that sits very uneasily. The feeling of being angry all the time is very much at odds with my desire to be a nice person and to be a likable person, and I think that kind of comes out in not very nice ways.
I relate to that more than I care to mention, certainly on this podcast, but I don't know, maybe this is interesting because maybe part of the kind of growing process for you, and again, this is getting back to the last record because I'm much more familiar with that one at this point, is the ability to be angry at other people. Like, you clearly are upset with your mom, and it's very much on the record, and it seems like that is, maybe you were deflecting a lot of that towards yourself, and obviously that's not really healthy, and maybe it's actually, in a way, it is healthy to go the other way with it.
I can never decide. I remember when I was maybe like 18, and I had a girlfriend who was not even that much older than me. Maybe I was 19 and she was like 23 or 24.
4 years is a much bigger difference when you're 19.
yeah, it seemed a lot like she seemed a lot more adult than me and my friends. But then myself and my friend who was the same age, we were talking about her, and we're like, oh my God, she's so, she just blames everything on her parents. If I get to that age and I'm still going on about my parents, kill me, basically. And then, like, cut to 41 and I'm very much still banging on about my parents. But I feel like it's fine to do that, but you have to be aware of it, I guess. There's a song on my new record which I feel like there's a song called Sometimes I Just Want to Feel Bad, and it starts off, I don't ordinarily quote my own lyrics, by the way, but it must be quite comfortable. It says, starts off, some of you have been boring, I won't name names, and it kind of goes through a list of indictments on, like, other people. But then the last line of the song is, sometimes I want to forget that I'm broken by concentrating on your shortcomings. And I think that's kind of like, it's kind of like, yeah, you can be really pissed off, but like, you have to be able to be called out on it and be like, well, yeah, it's just because it's easier to concentrate on what's going wrong with you and what you did wrong.
Being like this comfortable being this personal on record, is that something that you had to work up to? Again, I keep going back to the last record because I know it really well. And there's like, I was listening to it today, and like the title track on that record is a lot. It's great, and there are a lot of really incredible lyrics, and it's very funny, and like I'll quote your lyric to you, but I think I'm here in spite of my best effort is like it's a very funny lyric, but it's bare in a way that for obvious, and I think maybe good reasons, like a lot of people aren't comfortable being. Is that something that comes with time?
Friends, baby, I'm scared of time, but that won't stop me trying.
I think so. Like, even talking to you, I try and get my head together, because you don't want to have, like, there's like, you want to come across well, but also like I don't want to have a conversation where I think, that was a bit of a weak way to answer, or a bow out, or you didn't listen properly and you didn't think properly. Like, I try and maybe that, honest, without wanting to be too on the nose, maybe that's like a therapy thing as well. Like just kind of trying to think about it properly. And I think musically, I try and be like pretty economical in terms of, I feel like that kind of makes, like in a kind of crafty sense, like I feel like it makes it better. But generally I try as much as possible to kind of say what I mean, like, as exactly as possible. And I'm sure there's lots of like, psychological reasons why that would be. But yeah.
Being as precise with your language as possible.
I think so, because when it's really nice to hear someone articulate exactly what they mean, there's a certain sense of satisfaction with that, and I think I admire that, and I would like to be able to do that as well.
At the same time, something that music, I guess poetry too, but that that music affords you in a way that certainly like conversation doesn't necessarily, is the ability to express something that to you feels really true without giving anything in the way of details.
I think with music, the lack of like that kind of the space that exists and what you don't say is what makes it accessible to other people. And that, so you spoke about the title track for my last record, and obviously I've gone to great lengths in that to make it as personal as possible, including like dates and names of friends and details that are very specific to me. And I've said this to people before, but really surprised me with that record, that people would still come up to me and say, oh my God, that song, I'm seeing this guy and it's exactly like that. And I was like, quite, to be honest, like quite shocked is too strong, but I was surprised because I'd just gone to such lengths to make it very specific to myself. But that's kind of what I realised was, yeah, like it's in that space that people kind of are able to fill in their own. I guess that's what makes songwriting different from memoir. Is it like, because memoir is so
it's specific,
explicit and specific for sure. And I think that songwriting it allows people to kind of insert themselves, which I think is probably quite nice about it.
You know, we were talking about this musician before, and about, I probably injected into that maybe the idea of like of chasing success. I don't want to imply this as self-sabotage because I don't think it is, but I could be totally off on this, but that being so honest about things that people don't want to talk about or find horrific, you're not setting yourself up to have like a big puppet, obviously, you know. It is, you know, and at the same time, it's really interesting because, you know, as I was saying before, like I think that last record was a new plateau for you, both in spite and because it was so honest.
Yeah, I think when we've been talking about kind of degrees of success, I think that was definitely very, for me at least, quite specific to my younger experience of being in a band. And I guess also a kind of a bit of a sense of, when you're dragging people around, you know, you want it to be worth it for everybody. So kind of a sense of maybe like responsibility or obligation towards the people who are involved in that. But then definitely for my own work, more and more. I actually had a dream last night that someone was singing my song, one of my brand new songs that I'm recording soon, on stage, like in a real kind of pop arrangement. And then I was in the audience being like, I wrote that song. Like telling everyone.
I don't know if this made it over to where you are. I don't know if this is going to have any cultural resonance to you at all. But the song Fast Car by Tracy Chapman.
Oh, yeah,
you know that
yeah.
song?
Yeah.
So that was like big song in the 90s. It was like, it's her signature song. And it's like a really deeply personal.
It's a very sad song.
It's generational trauma. It's singing about, you know, about like abuse and neglect, and but a huge hit for her. And now there's a pop country artist who had a #1 country hit with the song. It's like a white guy, just generic bland country singer.
Don't think I have.
Do you know Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy?
Yeah.
So I was listening to him on a podcast talking about it, and he said something that I thought was like, I think he kind of nailed it, where he said that he heard it on the radio, and the sense that he got was that, and this is kind of like the Nashville machine that gave him a bunch of songs to cover, and he kind of like, he went through them all and did recordings of each of them, and because of that, that song doesn't have a specific personal resonance with him. And that's really interesting to me to hear that, like you describe somebody singing a pop version of your song, because either when somebody's reinterpreting your music, either they find something deep in that song that they connect with, or they don't. So
was Will Oldham talking about it like that was the failure of that song, was that it didn't resonate because of that?
He was saying, like, listen, like, you know, this guy is like good at what he does, which, you know, fine. Like, I don't think it's wrong, but that there were that he just didn't get the song, that there were nuances that he just didn't get, and he was just covering it like covering a song. And there are some songs, this is me speaking, but there are some songs that you can just cover as a song, and there are some songs that, like, I think that you really need to that subject matter needs to really deeply resonate with you in order for you to do a good job at it.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably go so far as to say that it's entirely that you have, everything has to resonate with you for it to do anything. But yeah, I always say that I would like, I think that's why my dream was interesting to me, because I always say that, and the song in particular that this person was singing was one that I actually, because sometimes, so I work by myself a lot. Because of that, I have quite little outside influence, and because of that, sometimes I like working to a brief, whether it's like a brief of my own design, or whether it's like, you know, like I did a record that I had to write it in 3 months and perform it on a particular instrument. That Queen Who Stole the Sky record was that in particular. And so I feel like sometimes a brief works in lieu of bandmates or collaborators, or anything like that. And so because of that, sometimes I kind of mentally play with the idea of like writing songs for other people. And because I can kind of like, I feel like content notwithstanding, like I know how to put a song together, like in terms of making it palatable. And yeah, so the song that this person was singing in this performance was one that I was like kind of fucking around being like, okay, I'm going to write something for like, that's not of my experience, but like, and I played it to my husband and he was like, it sounds like one of your songs. And I was like, fuck, I blew it. Actually, on the record that you're familiar with, the Me and On We, Full Mood was a song that I wrote trying to write for someone else, and then but the point of my story being like, I do try and write stuff for other people, and then I end up getting too attached to it, and I'm like, no, I want that. It's for me. So I keep them all for myself.
When you say write for somebody else, do you mean that abstractly, or do you mean like a specific artist? I
mean like in a commercial way, like to be like, yeah, I've written this, does this person want to do it? But like, I inevitably always end up liking them and keeping them.
It's an interesting exercise.
Yeah.
There's liking it and keeping it, but then there's not feeling like it's, I guess, broad enough or adaptable enough for a different person to play.
Yeah, see, that's kind of what I like fucking with a little bit, is trying to make things broad. And I honestly, like, unfortunately, I don't think I'm very good at it. Like, even, you know, so I come from like a hospitality background, like I said, but like, I always go to like a bar or whatever, right? And I'm like, if I had a bar, I would do this. And inevitably the things I describe would make it the kind of environment that only I want to go to. And like, I just consistently am reminded by the fact that I've got zero idea of what is broad. Like sometimes, again, to my husband Simon, like we'll talk about like a certain artist or musician or whatever that's popular, and I'll be like, but I just don't understand what I need. Who likes this? Like, who likes this type of music? And he'll kind of try and, like, he used to own a record store, so he's got like vast musical knowledge. He'll try and explain to me, even sometimes anecdotally, about the people that would come into the shop to buy. He'll be like, because I'll be like, who would like that? No one would like that. He's like, that flew off the shelves. He's like, that was our best-selling record of 2018 or whatever. And I'm like, I'm shocked. Like, I have no idea what people like. Yeah, so trying to write songs that people will like is a fool's errand for me, I think.
I was talking to Carl Newman. I had him on the show, you know, from New Pornographers. And like, obviously, like, that's a man who can write a really good pop song.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, you know, about this whole industry of people, and like a lot of like really great and respectable musicians who have had indie careers have like parlayed that into writing for successful musicians. And I sort of like asked him about that, and he basically said, don't you think that if I could do that, that I would?
Yeah, it's true.
Don't you think that if I could write a song for, you know, Beyonce, that I would write a song for Beyonce? It's just, you can write a really great power pop song, and that doesn't mean that it's translatable. And like, and at least in his case, like that's closer than the songs that you put on record to a pop song.
I think that I could. I'm not going to lie. I think like I think
this is a great idea. I think this is an awesome thought experiment, and I want to hear.
See, I think that
you get as close as you can get.
See, I feel like all you'd need to do is replace a few of the New Zealandisms. You got to sort the accent out, obviously. Like that's not going to fly. Replace a few of the metaphors with maybe like, you know, more universal brands or things like that, maybe. Like, I feel like I could do it.
Well, that's your homework assignment.
One day, I will come to you I'll be like, you hear a song on the radio and it will be one that a really rubbish song that I've written.